Okay, guys, this is video number 6 for financial planning assignment for year 10 core math. And for this part, we are going to do observation and assumptions. All right, and remember where we are. Okay, so last time we've done the first part of the assignment, which is the introduction. Okay, we've written the aim of the introduction, and we also has talked about the steps required to solve the problem. Right, that's what we did in last videos. All right, okay, so for this video, I will try to give you some ideas about the observation and assumption. Okay, so first of all, what are the observation and assumption for the assignment? Okay, so to put things really in very short form, you might say as observation are just some facts, okay, which are relevant to your financial planning. All right, so I have to emphasize the word fact. All right, and so in comparison, what are the assumptions? Right, so assumptions are something you are not quite sure whether they are facts or not. They might be facts or might not. All right, but for the simplicity of your assignment, you need to assume they are facts. All right, so that means assumptions might be or might not be fact. Okay, so normally they are not 100% facts, but they could be like close to what it really is, what fact is, but it's not 100%, right? So let's say first try to find some observation. So in your booklet, okay, so we have suggested some facts for you. Okay, so so those facts, you could consider them into 3 major categories. Okay, so let me type it. So first category should be like about your income. Okay, and second could be your expenses. Okay, and third could be your saving. Okay, and fourth, and it must be something to do with the price of the car. Okay, and the last would be the loan for the car. Right, so there are a few things there, right? So that's what you need to fill in. So you don't need to have all the observation, then that would be too long. You might just have some observation you think they are quite relevant, they are very useful for you, right? So you might get one observation for each of those items. Okay, so for example, how about the income, right? So there are many things you've done about your incomes, but one thing you might say is like, okay, so when we go back to your spreadsheet, all right, so you see the income means you need to have average hourly rates and average working hours per week to get the income, all right? So, and there are many different sources for income. Okay, so you might say, okay, one of the observation you might say, okay, so it's just for reference. That doesn't mean you have to do the same thing as me, right? So you might say there are many different sources of income. Okay, okay, and you might, but in those sources, the major source of income is from part-time job. Okay, sorry, part-time work. Okay, so it's not necessarily true. For some of you, you might consider my major income is from my parents' sponsor. All right. So, or you might say my major income is from selling things online. So all these things are okay. So as long as it's consistent with what you did in your financial planning. All right. So, and you need to think about your own answer. You can't just copy from mine. All right. So, and how about the expenses? So for expenses, all right. So let's see if there anything suggested here. Okay, not much. So you have to think about any implication, sorry, any observation for the expenses. Okay, so let's go back to see. So expenses, so there are regular expenses, there are one-off expenses, right? So sometimes your regular expenses is easier to predict, but how about one-off? Sometimes it's not that predictable, right? So you might say something like, okay, regular expenses can be planned. Okay. Okay, with confidence. One-off expenses can only be, okay, estimate. Okay, all right. So that's what the nature of the expenses. So you see, observations normally about the nature of those items, right? So that's what you observe. All right. Okay, and right. So let's see. Is there any observation for your income? Okay. Sorry, for the saving. All right. So let's see. Any observation related to saving here? Car values, not. Inflation rate, not. Saving account vary in interest rate, terms and conditions. Yeah, so that might be the one. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I need to edit that. Okay, so that would be our observation for income, or sorry, for saving. Saving account vary in interest rate, terms and conditions. Therefore, the one select must be the highest yielding for the time given. Okay, you might use your own words, all right? You might put it differently. You might say, okay, so because in our case, we try to make the monthly deposit like $300. We do that for some reason, because for $300 plus, so for at least $300 regular monthly deposit, then the bank will offer you a higher interest rate, all right, like 1.52%. All right, so you might consider that, because that's one of the nature for our class. All right, so you might say things like to have higher interest rate offer from the bank, it is we require monthly contribution, I need regular monthly deposit of at least $300. All right. Okay, so that's basically some of the observational saving. You might just use one of them, right? And how about the price of the car? Okay, So let's see if there's some observation for the price of the car. Car values vary greatly, so a car must be selected within its financial reach. Okay, so you might just use this one. And you better reword them, right? Okay, so if you just put exactly the same observation and the same wording, possibly I can't give you a high mark because there's nothing from your own. Okay, car values are very greasy, so a car must be selected which is within financial reach. Okay, so how about other considerations? So you might say, you might observe that when you select a car, right? So you will say the new car is generally more expensive than the used car, than the second-hand car, but a new car can be more likely to have a loan offer with lower interest. You might have something like that. So you might use like a new car is much expensive than a second-hand car of the same model, but a new car is more likely to secure a loan at a lower interest rate. So that's kind of observation you could put in. All right, that's just my suggestion. You might have your own. Sorry, grammatically. All right. Okay. And how about the loan for the car? So let's see, is there anything for the loan of the car? Loan vary in interest rate, terms, and conditions. The loan select depends on the interest rate, 3 and 5 years period. Okay, so that's the one you might consider. That's the one you might consider, right? Okay. So, and you might consider another one as well. So repayment period of loan vary. So 4 likely monthly, hence choose the option that's minimize the interest, but it's still affordable, right? So that's another one you might consider. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's see. Now we have observation for five aspects of this assignments: income, expenses, saving, price of the car, loan for the car. Okay. So try to get one observation for each of the item, right? So and you don't need to write all those observations, right? For saving, you might just write one. You don't need two, okay? But make sure you use your own word and use your own scenario. Consider your own scenario as well, right? So that's for observations. Okay, so the second part is for assumptions. So like I said before, assumptions is something like they might be true or might not be true, all right? So but you need to make the assumptions so that your assignment your financial planning can be done. All right. So there are some assumptions we need to consider, right? So and you need to consider those assumptions from 5 aspects as well, just like what we did before, right? So I just copy all those things there. Okay, so, and of course, I need to okay. Okay, so I just need to delete those things. These are for observations. Okay, so let's think about what's your assumption for the incomes, right? Let's see if there's any assumption for the income. Okay, no change to hourly rate in awards, therefore enabling future earnings to be calculated. All right, so these are for income. You might consider that. If that's not true, then you need to assume other scenario, right? So for example, in your case, all right, so you see that so for someone working Domino's, his average hourly rate $13, working for 20 hours, right? So those things are actually have some underlying assumptions, because for example, how can you be so sure the average hourly rate is $13? How can you be so sure that you can work for 40 weeks each year, right? So these are assumptions. So how can we put it? You might say something like, okay, like the hourly rate and working hours per week can be predicted. Okay, accurately. Okay, all right. So that's one of the assumptions you've made, all right? Okay, and there are other assumptions as well in some of your work. So for example, normally we will assume the second year of your work, you might have a rise in your salary because you become 1 year older. So you might have a higher pay, right? So you might say the hourly rate can be increased. Okay, going into the second and year. Okay, so you can say the hourly rate can be increased. All right. So how about the expenses? All right. So if there's nothing you could talk about the expenses, you just leave it alone. All right. We don't need all the assumptions, because in the normally you only need 2 or 3 assumptions. Then that would be fine. All right. So for saving, all right, you might say, okay, one of the assumptions in our work is like we assume you can do the regular monthly contribution, all right? So monthly deposits can be made, okay, to satisfy these amounts of deposits to enjoy the higher interest offered from the bank. Okay, so that's quite important, because in our work, okay, so we assume that the extra saving per month is more than $300, so that you could use that, okay, the saving plan from the bank, which will offer you 1.25% interest rate. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's one major assumption in your saving plan. Okay, so how about the price of the car? Okay, you might see, is there anything we could use for the price of the car? Okay, so price of car is affected by the inflation. Okay, So one of the assumptions is that inflation rate will continue to fluctuate around the similar values, noting the past 2 years period. All right, but sorry, I skip a little bit. All right, but I need to be careful here, right? So when you use this assumption from the list of recommendation, all right, you need to be careful because we use 5 previous year, okay, not just 2. All right, so you need to change that 2 year into 5-year period. All right, so that's why we assume that inflation rate is about the average of the rates of the equals the average rate of the last 5 years. All right, so that's why we calculate the price according to that average inflation rate. Okay, so we did that in here. All right, so remember that's the worksheets for getting the loan. Okay, so in B, inflation rate for the past 5 years. So see, that's 5 years, and you calculate the average inflation rate as 1.5%, right? Okay, so that's quite important for our assumption. All right, so last one, the loan of the car, right? The loan of the car, okay, so I think this one is quite useful. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, so the loan for the car, the interest rate on savings and the loan account will not vary. And addition fees will not be introduced, all right, enabling future earnings to be calculated. Okay, right now we are only talking about the loan account, so you could say the interest rate on the loan account will not vary. Okay, so that means you use a fixed rate, right? Okay, so these are the assumptions you need to put in for your assignment. Okay, so for assumptions, you don't need to have too many assumptions. All I need you to have is like 2 or 3 really meaningful assumptions for your financial planning. Okay, so and that would be good enough for me. All right, so to sum up, okay, so remember we need to do observation assumption as a second part of our assignment. All right, so for observations, you need to state the facts relevant to your financial planning. Okay, and there are 5 aspects of your financial planning, so you try to get one major observation for each aspect, right? So just like the things I plug here. And for assumptions, okay, you still can consider that 5 aspects, but you don't need to get each aspect one assumption. You might just get 2 or 3 assumptions in total for the whole financial planning. That would be good enough. All right, and okay, so remember you need to write all the assumptions and the observations in your own word. Okay, don't just copy in your own word. All right, okay, so I just give you some ideas for you to know what you need to do. That doesn't mean you should copy from my work. Okay, so that's the end of video number 6. So see you next video.